Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, folks. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Marketing You Practice podcast, the podcast where I have the pleasure of simplifying the marketing and the mindset so you, the chiropractor, can increase your income, your impact, and your enjoyment in practice too. In today's episode, I'm speaking with Eric Holtzclaw. Now, Eric owns a marketing agency over in Atlanta in the States. And we had a conversation today where we spoke about many things, some of which we spoke about was content creation. Now, when I'm talking with you guys each and every week on the socials, via email, coming up with content is one of the struggles that many of you have. Now, Eric had an approach to this that was different from what I've heard other people talked about. He talked about creating these hyper-local pages. So this was content that our audience, our potential audience, is interested in that's slightly adjacent to what we do as chiropractors as well. So he has some fantastic examples of how we can do that and start to begin the relationships. He had some interesting thoughts in regards to marketing budgets. How much should we be spending on our marketing? What should we be spending when we're a new practice versus when we're established as well? And we spent some time actually talking about marketing agencies as well. This has been a conversation I've had with the guests a little bit more of recent, differentiating between a full suite marketing agency versus somebody that just focuses just on social media as well. And one of the challenges that we can have is if we're putting our money into marketing agencies and they only have access to a small thing, that can limit the results that we actually have as well. So we also talk about some of the mistakes that practices make with regards to their marketing and how much time it's going to take to get results. This was a fun conversation with a really neat guy. Hope you enjoy. Let's go talk with Eric. Eric, welcome to the Marketing You Practice podcast. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to be chatting with you. Now, in part of the information, getting to learn about one of the wonderful things that you do. You've spoken to over 1,000 entrepreneurs. That's a lot of talking with people. What are some of the key things that you've learned from speaking with 1,000 entrepreneurs?
Well, it's interesting because having been a serial entrepreneur and starting a bunch of businesses, much to the chagrin of my wife, I wanted to understand what made entrepreneurs tick, right? So like, why do they do what they do? And so I decided to do this interview process, but I thought I'd find like they didn't have the money or the resources or there were things like that that they were missing. But what's interesting is that it's really more about nature and nurture in the entrepreneurial world. And so you have some entrepreneurs who are what I call rectify entrepreneurs. So they're trying to prove somebody wrong. So somebody told them that they couldn't do it. And so they're like, I'm going to show you. And then you have the people who are magnify. So they, were told that they were special, that something about them is, great. And they really lived and dug into that. Typically, there is some kind of conflict or something in their background that makes them an entrepreneur. Most people who are more healthy would not take the path of entrepreneurship. They would just, have a nice hobby and work 9 to 5. But understanding if you fall in the rectify or the magnify category helps you build a more healthy company and be a more healthy entrepreneur. Rectifies typically build businesses potentially for the wrong reason. And when they realize that, it can be very impactful to the business, or it can be the thing that sets them free. It allows them to like give up the, oh, my eighth grade teacher told me that I'd never be able to, I'd never be successful. And so you're still trying to make that eighth grade teacher feel, that you're trying to prove something to them. And magnifies will build really cool companies. They typically build like the biggest, largest companies because they just see everything as a pay it forward.
Do you have a definition of what makes an entrepreneur?
Well, entrepreneurs are like they do not rule followers, even though they look like they are. I appear to be one, but I just don't believe rules are for other people, not for me. They typically have had some kind of something in their past that they're overcoming. There's some kind of like thing that helped them to kind of break the mold, and they think differently. They think about the world as a set of opportunities. I've never met an entrepreneur who was kind of a negative Nancy or something. It just doesn't work that way. You can't make it if you don't believe that every single day when you get up, things are going to be better than they were the day before.
I think it might have been Dan Sullivan of Strategic Coach. I remember hearing him talk about his kind of definition of entrepreneur as somebody who takes information from a lower order to a higher order. And I really, we see the world. I think of myself as an entrepreneur there too. We see things that are scattered and there's misinformation there. We think I can organize this in a way to make it simpler for people. And whether that be a new way to make coffee, whether that be a new way to market or grow your business, or, whether that be a new social media platform as well. It
Yeah.
would seem to me that,
Yeah. And
sorry, you go.
I mean, one thing that my leadership, we just did our leadership annual and we were talking about like t-shirts and something. And so the t-shirt that they wanted to give me, and I'll say it cleaner than they did, is that should have a t-shirt that says, I turned poop into not poop.
We're okay with the swear words here if need
Okay,
be.
well
So,
then they
but I
said
can kind of,
I turned shit into not shit. That's what they
yeah,
said it should be. So yeah, but yeah.
yeah, I love it from there too. So, I want to talk with you today. There's a couple of things I want to touch on as well. Many of our audience, it's interesting because a lot of chiropractors would see themselves, I think, to go into business and to own your own business. Obviously, there's an element there of entrepreneurial ness, ism inside of that as well there too. When it comes to marketing, one of the conversations, excuse me, that chiropractors tend to struggle with, certainly in a digital world there, is the content creation.
Yeah.
And particularly content that converts as well. So many of them can create content, but it just doesn't do anything as well. So I'd love to chat with your background. One of your areas of expertise is this idea of content that converts. Can you talk a little bit to that as well and see if we can help some chiropractors get some more traction with their content?
Yeah, so the simple, easy way to know that you're creating content that's going to convert is, instead of thinking about your business or your chiropractic practice as a catalog. So here's all the things that I do. I have all these services. And so it's like your service list. Think of it as a magazine. So what would be the magazine of your practice? What are the elements that make it interesting? And all these, reality television shows basically do behind the scenes. They're advertisements for all these businesses, and they're giving you the behind the scenes stories of why the person started it, what they care about, why they got involved in it. And so if the chiropractor can start to consider how to tell those stories, and it feels uncomfortable for a lot of people when they first start, because it does mean you have to put yourself out there a little more than you want. But you can do it in a way that's not just telling everybody all your stuff, right? But that it does. People like to buy from people. They are out there vetting you. If your website and content says the exact same thing as another person's website or content, how do I make the choice between the two? And greater than 70% of the decision is made before someone picks up the phone, calls your practice, reaches out to you over email. So all that content, all those things that you're creating are what really move them along on that conversion. And if you go into, those of us that are old enough to remember magazines, you go into a bookstore and there's the magazines on the shelf, you're going to pick the one that has like the most interesting stories in it and the one that's going to really, resonate with who you are. So owning that and telling those stories, you can still get across the types of services you provide, because you just bury them into the story instead of saying, we have, this kind of adjustment or that kind of adjustment. Tell me why that adjustment's important. Like, why would I need that? What would be the story behind the first time you did that for someone and how they felt afterwards? So those kind of things are way more effective than just telling me what you do. I can probably figure out what you do.
One of the challenges, excuse me, croaky throat. One of the challenges that I hear from chiropractors all the time is that I'm not all that interesting. Like, I don't really have a lot to share there. How do you
Everyone
mind, like, yeah, how do you find that stuff?
everyone is interesting. I mean, everyone is interesting. Everyone has some little story. And you go back to, why did you originally decide to do this? Or how did you end up in this? I mean, when I run my podcast, The Claw, I follow this formula and I start with, tell me about your past. Like, how did you end up where you are today? What do you do today? What's interesting to that? And then where are you headed? And so if you start to just do that for yourself, you can start to come up with what those stories are. One way that you can do that can help you cheat is, like, if you lay this out on a 12-month calendar, let's say, what
Mhm.
are the key events that happen within each month? And so let's say, for example, I'm running a chiropractor practice and we're getting into the month of January. What kind of resolutions might I set for my clients or myself? And that becomes a content piece that I can put out there that's, again, way more interesting than get 20% off or whatever. Or, February here in the States is Valentine's Day. And so, like, what is chiropractic a thing that I could give my loved one? Like, why would I give back to them as something as a gift, right? So those little things that are happening anyway, how can you tell your story along it? And that's really the best way to do it anyway, because you want to leverage a larger story. It's very difficult for a small business to create their own story. And if meaning like the news is picking something up and carrying it, typically when a small business has done something that the news picks up, there's a problem, right? It's not unless you can do some kind of guerrilla tactic and give away some appointments or something like that. So
Yeah.
just you're following the herd, but you're telling your own unique perspective of what's going on in that category.
Mm. I have a client who I work with who last year um, released a press release to his local town about the mistakes that people make with regards to New Year's resolutions and how they go too hard, too fast, and all the injuries that happen as a part of that. And he got just the most wonderful publicity from it, from newspaper to television to you name it from there too, because he piggybacked on something that was already happening. It was already in the zeitgeist. And I think if we
Yeah.
just do that, in itself, what's happening, what's in the news anyway, and how can I give my kind of reference for it there too. I often,
Yeah.
I used to kind of feel the same way with a lot of my social media, and I spent some time kind of watching what content I engage with, and I engaged with the most basic of, people weren't having to do wonderful things, but I was interested if they, went for a bike ride. I was interested. And so I think we're looking for events in our life that, we just get to kind of share the journey, and share the most basic of things that can be interesting because it is social media as opposed to kind of media, as well there too. We were
Yeah, and
chatting a little bit.
relatable. Make it something
Yes.
relatable. Yeah.
Yeah. We were chatting a little beforehand about reaching the right kinds of people. And one of the things that's in common with most of the people that come to see chiropractors is their location. We tend to not travel interstate to see our chiropractors as well. And there are some changes and ways that we can make sure that we're reaching kind of local target audiences. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so a couple pieces of advice in that. So within a local category, you're going to have potentially a lot of competition. And so
Mm,
deciding what your ideal client is and being very specific. So are you going after high end? Are you going after someone who's interested in organic or, someone who wants to maybe someone who prefers certain types of service or whatever that is. So if we can do that, then all of a sudden I now do have a differentiation and I can start to look at just within my local target, creating what we call hyper local pages, which are pages
mhm,
that are very targeted in that category, using keywords that are specific to the ideal client that you're trying to attract. And it's very, entrepreneurs and salespeople want to sell to everybody. And that's just not how it works. You have to niche down. So if you think about restaurants, you could have five different types of pizza restaurants in the same area, and one's going to be the cheap, pick it up on the way home and feed me and the kids, all the way up to like the gourmet pizza, right? So picking your kind of lane within the market you're in, and then understanding how people are going to search for you such that you can create a page, a hyperlocal page that has a lot of information about your area with some of those keywords is going to get you organic search. Organic search is stuff you're not paying for. And then you can use some paid to kind of help to supplement that and make sure that you're staying in front of people when they're in the search process, when they're looking
mm.
for something actively.
Can we dive a little deeper into that? Let's give you an example that our practice is a family practice. We
Yep.
do a lot of really great work with kids, particularly the kids that we see are high needs kids. So many of them have kind of different learning coordination issues. So it tends to be, we find that if we speak to the mums, these mums tend to be kind of aged sort of late 20s to early 40s. They tend to be a higher income. They look for a more natural bent. So they're more likely to kind of shop at the organic food store. They're more likely to be kind of yoga practitioners, that kind of thing. So these hyper-local pages, how would we go about building those? What would be on them? What content would be there if we wanted to reach this kind of person?
So you want keywords around what you do, but you gave me a lot of really good, useful information that I would also add. So you may have, links to local organic stores. You may have the best yoga information. So other things that they're going to be interested in that is not just what you do. So I'm making this page kind of filled with things that that person's going to be looking for in that category, with chiropractic being the sort of central focus. So, we did a set of these for a guard security company, and we,
Mm.
talked about the community they were in and how to prevent break-ins in that community. And we had news around things that were happening. And so those drove organic search traffic for us without having to pay for anything. So it's
Right. So this might be this idea that looking for natural health solutions in your area here too. We've done all the hard work for it. This is where we send our patients.
yeah.
So kind of just bringing that sort of information together. Yeah.
Yeah, that way, and not being like, you don't want to become, don't try to become another news page, right? Like that's one of the things that we did back in the early days. I've been around long enough now to, back in the very early days of the internet, it is about very specifically thinking about, you mentioned a ton of keywords as you were talking about it. So all kinds of things I would want to look up: search intent. So you can, like, how many people are searching for that term, and how do I build a page that has those search terms on it, such that when they're searching for them and I have the page set up with those really key things, my page has a much higher likelihood of showing up on the organic search results.
And then how do I take that person there that might be looking for a local yoga studio into potentially becoming a patient at my practice?
So you need to start viewing the fact that if they're willing to give you their email address or their phone number, then that's them paying you for something. So as little as possible that you need to take from them to kind of start following them, understanding that a good content approach can take up to 6 months to get
Yes.
a payoff, right? We got to be in front of people about 18 to 21 times to build brand awareness. And so by either getting them into just a newsletter that you're sending them, the fact that they came to your site, if you've got it set up with the right pixel, you can start to follow them around with some of your ads. That's that
Mm.
whole, thing that people are like, I sell you this, and then all of a sudden it shows up on my phone. Well, you probably searched for it or something to get to it. So how do you start to appear to that individual that you're everywhere, when really and truly you're just everywhere for them?
Yes.
And not about buy from me. It's, hey, let me teach you or tell you something more around an area or interest that you have. So it's not as self-serving. It's like, it's thinking about, how can I be of service to this community that I really care about in a meaningful way, but also not everything. Like, you do need to that's the mistake I make, is like people try to be too broad with it. I'm like, no, pick, like, if it's organic resources, like maybe you have a newsletter that goes out on a regular basis and talks about the latest practices for special needs kids, but also has some links over to, the latest thoughts on that, in the organic food section as well, things like that.
Mm. Is where is the place, if ever, for putting an offer in front of these people? Is it all just kind of value added content, or is there a time and place when, okay, after this length, that we should give them an invitation to come into the practice?
Yeah, I mean, I am a fan of driving someone to what we call a squeeze page. So they've
Mm.
shown interest in something, and so they go to that page, and then providing an offer on their way out or way in is really good, because that means that they've gotten to a point of, oh, now I'm fully interested in this specific service, or this, I'm about to set an appointment. Like, they go to your appointment page, and for some reason they pop out of that, or they're looking at your contact page, like something that becomes a further indication. What is disturbing to me is when I visit a site for the very first time and I don't even know who you are as a brand, and I whatever, and you're like, you want my email address, you're going to give me a discount or whatever. You don't know me. I don't even know if I want to buy from you at this point. Like, leave me alone. And making sure you're peppering your content into other places outside of your site, so that your site does become the place that they're going to almost last. Like, along the journey, if they're spending 20 times looking at things, they're spending 15 to 17 of those somewhere else, on a review site, on an article that's been placed, whatever, such that I know that by the time they make it to my site, they're much more interested. And so I can provide that offer. And I do think behavioral based offers are very effective.
Yes. Can you elaborate on what a behavioral type offer is?
So it's going to schedule an appointment page and then like
Yes.
deciding to leave. And so as they
Yes.
start to leave, you're like, hey, we'll do your first appointment for free, or we'll give you $100 off or whatever. Did you know we take insurance? And then still be okay with the fact they may not uptake there, but give them still not ready, give me your email address. And then you can continue to follow up with them on that email address afterwards. So it's like, and they're in that buying cycle. They're in that, oh, I'm ready to do it. I've clicked on the right button. I've made it all the way to the point of like almost scheduling the appointment, and then I'm out.
Yeah. So if we go back sort of 40,000 foot view, one of the ways for us to reach in this situation, the mums of these families there too, is to find out what else they might be interested in kind of tangentially to our services, create content that's really loaded with the keywords they might be interested in, have them come to that page, offer value, have an invitation on that page there that might be, hey, ready to, want to get my weekly, fortnightly, monthly newsletter, or offer something of what's the next step in terms of value there for them. Make sure we have a pixel on that page there that means that we can follow them around and just continue to be everywhere for them. When they land on pages that might be of high intent, which is a booking page or something like that, then that's probably the best spot for us to kind of put an offer in front of them. Is that a reasonable kind of campaign for us to be looking at?
It is. And what the problem with that is that we
Uh-huh.
live in a society of impatience. And so we will work with, and a small business owner wants, that you just opened your practice, you want people to be there immediately. It just doesn't happen that way. It's a flywheel. And so that you have to have patience along the way. And
Mm.
so what you said is a very good sequence, but the listener needs to understand that's not going to happen. Like, you're not going to post it and then the next day it's going to convert. It's got to have time to kind of like make its way through the system. And think about yourself. You're not going to, so rarely, unless it's like an on fire emergency, you've got water in your basement and you need to get your water heater replaced. You're exploring. And this is an important decision. Like, I'm going to have somebody messing around with my body, and
Mm.
those decisions are considered more dangerous decisions. It's not truly a transactional decision. So like, if I go buy a brand new bottle of water and I don't like the bottle of water, who cares? If I pick a chiropractor that ends up being a problem, then it's a problem. So I really want to make sure I'm trusting the person that I'm selecting. I'm going to do a lot of
Yeah.
vetting before I make that decision.
And so you talked about that kind of 6 to 9 months. I kind of think of the Google zero moment of truth of their 11 hours of content and, 7 hours and 11 different touch points in 4 locations. Is
Yeah.
that time period, in your experience, getting longer? Are there ways we can compress it? How do we go about just managing that?
Yeah, it is about showing up soon and early so you become something that's an impression. I talk about, the average human being's attention span is 7 seconds. A goldfish has 8. So you have like 7 seconds to catch somebody and start showing your brand. And small businesses, the mistake I see is that they'll show their brand in lots of different ways. And you want to show up the same over and over again. So I'm consistently seeing that. And it's about being there at the point that person wants to make that decision, right? And guessing that, you can start to see some behaviors, like they're visiting your site more, they're looking at the content more. Those are times that you can start to like, okay, I need to speed this up, or that point of intention. But most of the time, you're just staying in the background until that person's like, I'm happy with where I am,
Mm.
but all of a sudden now I'm not. And so I'm looking for alternatives, or I've moved and I'm new to the and the first thing I'm going to do is not this. I'm going to get my house settled. I'm going to do this, whatever. And then sometime in the next 2 or 3 months, I'm going to, make that, now that I've tweaked my back, moving the refrigerator. So the earlier you do it, allowing people to kind of move along. 6 months is a guideline, typically, because it takes people a little period of time to even show up, because it's a little drum beat, and then all of a sudden, and I call it a flywheel. The more you do it, the more you're out there, the more you're kind of creating it. We're talking about BATCOM. So it's branding, awareness, traffic, conversion, optimization, and maintenance. BATCOM. You can find that on our website. Everyone wants conversion. But if I'm not getting traffic, I can't get conversion. If nobody knows who I am, awareness, then I can't get to traffic. And if I have a bad brand or no brand at all, and if you're just opening, you just now have a brand. So we have to move you along. And then once we know what's working, we can optimize and maintain it. And that's the manna, is like you've been doing it for a period of time. You know, if you spend $2 or $3 on an ad, you're going to get a conversion. That's the ultimate goal.
Mm. Can we expand on branding a little bit there too? You mentioned beforehand that many chiropractors are showing up differently in different places. What is brand? What do you mean by that too? And how does somebody kind of develop their brand?
So brand isn't just a logo.
Mm.
It's everything about your business, from the furniture to the, like, all those things are so aesthetically important. And chiropractors may or may not be the person who should even choose some of those things. I don't know, right? Like, it really needs someone who understands that soft touch. One of my favorite examples is like here in the Old Navy, Target, and Apple all use white. That's one of their colors. But when you see one of their commercials start, you can predict what company it's going to be before you see the logo, just based on the way it's brought in. That's an example of brand, just the white screen coming up on my page. And I'm like, oh, this is about to be an Apple commercial. So being very intentional about how your brand shows up, and that it's always consistently the words you're using, the imagery you use, the logo, of course, like what does that look like? And does it always feel consistently the same? And a good test for you is if you are on social media, go look at your Instagram page. And if your Instagram page looks like it all came from the same company, you're doing good. If it looks like, oh, well, that's like 17 random posts that have no theme to me, they don't thematically feel like they'd be together, then you may need to rethink how you're positioning your brand in the market.
In terms of budget wise, when you're dealing with a small service based business, in terms of putting all of this together, what should we be kind of thinking about budget wise on marketing?
Yeah, so for B2B brands, and this is sort of, it has a little bit of a consumer focus to it, so I might say a higher spend, but a B2C brand, we're in a maintenance year, we want them to spend 7 to 10% of their revenue in the marketing category. If it's establishment year, then it's closer to 12 to 15%.
Yes.
Some consumer brands we work with can spend as high as 40. But
Yeah.
that's also the more, and the way you don't spend 40 is by being unique. Like, the more commoditized you are, the more you have to spend in marketing. So like water is water is water. So those people have to spend way more. But if I'm a chiropractor and I focus on, kids with special needs, with moms that like organic food, like, you now started to get yourself into a lower category because you've really narrowed who that ideal client is, and you're not spending wasteful money. There's not a lot of spillage in your spend. So focused does help you spend less in marketing.
And where ideally would that, somewhere between kind of 7 and 12%, where would that go? If I'm looking to kind of allocate that, I love it as a percentage because it's obviously just related to my revenue. What are some of the options with regards to where, Eric, I should be allocating that?
So for a chiropractor, specifically the kind of practices that you're talking about,
Yeah.
you should outsource as much of it as possible, but outsource as much of it as possible to one single company.
Yes.
So instead of picking one person to do your social, one to do this, one to do that, you're wasting money because you then may have a translation issue across it. So I would find a more full service organization that can apply those things, and that they understand your brand, they're managing it, those types of things. And don't necessarily go for the cheapest, right? But I would find and I wouldn't try to do it myself. You
Mm.
shouldn't be doing your books yourself. You shouldn't be doing your taxes yourself. You shouldn't be doing your marketing yourself. Like, find a firm and bring them in, have them do it for you, and have them do as much of it as they can do for you. Be wary of the firm that's like a social media firm and tells you should do social media. They should start off and be like, hey, you should be doing a mix of things like social and SEO and whatever. So if you hire the wrong firm, they see everything as one tool, right? Like, if I have a
Yes.
hammer, everything looks like a nail. We
Yes.
we want someone who thinks more comprehensively about the approach.
How do we minimize the challenge of, if this is going to be something that's going to take time, and I buy into that, and the irony of it is that us as chiropractors are saying this with our patients that come and see us that hurt their back or,
No, everybody says that. You go to the gym, it's like, oh,
yeah,
but I want to be able to run a
yeah,
marathon tomorrow. And it's like, well, you're
yes,
not, going to, right? So yeah.
yeah. But how do we, because every week I'm chatting with chiropractors that are, at the tail end of a nasty agreement they have with a firm somewhere that they've said, listen, this is going to be 6 months before we get results. And it gets to month 5 and they say, well, maybe it's actually going to be closer to 12. How do we minimize that? Because I think we buy into this is going to take time, but 6 months seems like a long time before I'm going to see anything if I'm kind of shelling out money as well. How do you talk to that?
So I'd need to know more about the relationship. So one of the things that I do run into is everyone thinks they know marketing.
Mm,
And I posted that on LinkedIn this week. It's like it's amazing. Like people who've never done marketing think they're great at marketing because I can do words and whatever. So has the chiropractor allowed that agency or that firm to do what they're supposed to, or have they meddled? So I see because we've done, where it's like, oh, we're going to change our service offering or we've moved this or whatever. So make sure you take the ownership on your side. So like if I'm going to the gym, but I'm eating chocolate cake every night and I'm not losing any weight, well, I'm the one eating the chocolate cake. So you do need to think about that, right? So that's one part of it. But also, did the firm I hire, are they reporting to me? Like, am I getting monthly reports that show me what the status is? Am I being
mm,
advised? And are they pushing back on me and saying, well, that's not really the best way to think about it? Our firm does a discovery, and then we come back and say, if it were our company and our money, this is how we would spend it. And this
mm,
is how we would roll that out. And the clients that get the best results with us, they follow our prescription.
mm,
I can almost predict it. And you have to understand, just like a chiropractor, like you've got somebody who comes in and they're like, well, I'm not going to do the exercises you're telling me to do before in between the sessions. You're a service organization, so you can only make them do so much, right? But you have to be willing to be candid with them and say, yeah, well, but you're not going to get those results. So if you haven't heard them say that there's a reason that maybe they're not being allowed to follow what they've told the client to do. And you of course you're picking based on them showing they have results before they've done this, they understand it. If that's the case, there's a prescription they're following, and you need to allow them to do it, and you need to be comfortable when they push back if you're being too hands-on.
yeah. And I would imagine too, is that whilst it might take, let's just this example, you're talking about kind of 6 months before I get somebody on the phone, surely there are a number of lagging indicators that we could be looking at,
Yeah,
website visitors.
a hundred
This is how
percent.
many we have in a custom audience that we can pick up earlier on rather than waiting till 6 months that we're getting that sort of. What might be some of those? If I was interviewing, I'm like, okay, I want to work with a full service agency, whether it be much like yours or somebody else's. What questions might I want to ask them to make sure that we're a fit and, to minimize the chance of us not getting results?
So you should be wary that they can go ahead and tell you exactly what they're going to do on the first call. So they should be asking a lot of questions at the beginning, like, tell me about
Yes.
yourself. What does your practice look like? When are you starting? Like, they really shouldn't even offer a solution in the first call. That should be after they've had a chance to think through it, look at it, whatever. So that's always an indication of like somebody coming in with the silver bullet, or some system that they're using that would
Mm,
work. That can be a problem unless they're like a lead gen company that you're using, and then you should probably be paying them for leads, not using them as a dedicated service provider. And you started to indicate some of those. I don't care so much about website visits because I can fake that. So if I want to, I can make a lot of traffic come to your site, but I want to make sure that traffic's going to the right places. So we've decided we're going to lean into, special needs, kids with special needs, organic, and that's the kind of content. I want to make sure we're starting to get traffic to those things that we've agreed to are going to be our target areas.
love
In
that.
fact, I think someone visiting just your homepage is probably a failure. Because if I go to your homepage, that means I don't know where to go. And if I'm doing it right, I'm deep linking you to some content, some piece. So I really want to drive down the number of people just ending up on your homepage and have some of your other content outperforming or close to outperforming kind of your primary pages.
Yeah, great point. Love it, love it, love it. Tell me a little bit more about what you do and the great results that you get.
So, well, Liger we're named after a movie called Napoleon Dynamite, which you may or may not know. So it's a kind of a movie, and it
Yes.
was favorite animal, and it's a combination of two strong things. So a liger and a tiger, sorry, a lion and a tiger. And so we are a strategy and execution company. And we always start with strategy, and we really actually start with the business. So what is the business and where are you headed? Now, how do we put a strategy on that? And then how do we deliver that execution on the back end? So it's how we look at the world. We think about it that way. We look for long-term relationships with our clients. We want to become part of their company and make sure that their success, we really are in the background making them shine. It's about our clients, being known. That's our kind of overall theme. And our mission statement is to save the world from boring, broken marketing.
Yeah.
And marketing is either boring or broken or both.
Yeah. I love that about your website. It made me smile and a little chuckle kind of as the header image that was there as well. So hey Eric, thanks for chatting today. Some real clarity. So many mistakes that you have identified that many chiropractors make. This push for single service marketing agencies as well. A diagnosis and a prescription being done without the relevant work being done beforehand is something that's all too common amongst many of the people. And I like that idea that says, hang on, if I'm going to work with an agency that's based on leads, let me just pay you on leads. Like if you're so confident that this is what you can do, let me just pay you on leads. And that will work great for both of us. And, you've given a really lovely reminder about the importance of patience. And if we're really wanting to build a strong, thriving practice, then we need to be building relationships as well. So any final thoughts as we wind?
No, I mean, it really does remind me. I had a problem with my shoulder years ago, and I thought I was going to have surgery. And I went to the doctor and I was like, hey, I need to have surgery. And the doctor was like, no, I think you need to have physical therapy. And I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure like it's January. Can you go ahead and do it? Because I don't have time for like dealing with this. And then she sent me to do physical therapy and fixed my shoulder. And if she'd listened to me, I'd end up with like a shoulder surgery, right? So just trust your marketer. Trust your marketer. So yeah, I appreciate the time. Thank you for letting me chat with you.
Lovely, buddy. Take care. Have a wonderful afternoon. Talk soon.
Thanks.
If you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, you have to come and check out my Community Influencer Program. It's my monthly coaching program where we take all this material and I'll work with you to help you apply it, implement it, and systemize it. The Community Influencer Group Coaching Program is designed to help you increase your practice income, impact, and enjoyment. Join me over at anguspyke.com/join. That's anguspyke.com/join. I'd love to see you there.